New York's housing market just blinked. The temperature shifted, and the numbers tell a story that's impossible to ignore. Start with December. Buyers signed 1,712 contracts when the city usually sleeps through the holidays. Deals rose 0.7% from November into December, a winter uptick that hints at a spring that won't wait its turn. Look at the shelves. Depending on how you count, active for sale homes in December ranged from about 5,471 listings to roughly 14,000 units across the city. Year-over-year change fell into two very different lanes. One tracker shows a 4.7% drop in active listings, while another shows a 9.3% gain compared to the same month a year earlier. The counts diverge, but both sets of signals point in the same direction: scarcity at the top line and sudden pockets of abundance where new construction and fresh listings are appearing. Those pockets are not abstract. They have addresses. In Brooklyn's Brighton Beach, inventory surged nearly 49% in a single year. Queens Flushing followed with a 48% jump. Rego Park and Long Island City also climbed. So did Bushwick, Crown Heights, Midwood, East Flatbush, and Sheepshead Bay. Even Manhattan's financial district posted one of the strongest gains in new listings anywhere in the city. The wave is uneven. It is real. Prices responded. The city's median listing price in December landed at $1,500,000, down 6.1% from a year earlier. That decline outpaced the slight national easing. Price reductions ticked up as well. 4.2% of homes had marked down tags, a touch higher than last year. Sellers who missed the first footfall of returning buyers are starting to listen to the market. Time is moving differently, depending on where you stand. Across New York City, the average home spent 90 days on the market in December, almost unchanged, up just 0.3% from a year ago. But in Manhattan and Queens, market time tightened. Days on market shrank by 6 days in Manhattan and by 17 days in Queens. Sour mood on the surface, speed beneath it. That's what a turning point feels like. And then there's the rental side. Vacancy slipped 5.8% year over year in December. The median asking rent rose nearly 8% to $3,874. A total of 26,238 rentals were on the market that month, 5.8% fewer than the year before. When a city tightens like this, concessions become a pressure valve. Nearly 1 in 4 rentals offered at least 1 month free last month, the highest share since 2021. That cocktail, fewer vacancies, higher rents, and more giveaways, captures the odd shape of demand right now. Why is this happening? The explanation begins with money and the speed of money. Mortgage rates stabilized late last year. When the cost of borrowing stops climbing, buyers step forward. Sellers see them coming, and new listings follow. Deals pick up in a month, December, when the industry usually quiets. That's what it looks like when confidence slowly regains its footing. Supply matters too. New construction pushed the city's for-sale supply in December up 9.3% from the same period in 2024, adding the kind of relief that makes buyers pause, look twice, and bid with less panic. Inventory rose even as sales picked up, a rare pairing in a city where supply almost always trails demand. But the deeper current here is a decade in the making. 10 years ago, the typical home in the United States cost $233,800. In 2025, the median home price registered at $414,400. Over that same span, mortgage rates climbed from around 3.7% in 2016 to about 6.6% in 2025. Inventory shrank. The national market had roughly 1.65 million homes for sale in 2016. Today, there are about 470,000 fewer. Closings fell from 5.54 million in 2016 to 4.06 million last year. With higher prices, higher rates, and fewer options, the median first-time buyer climbed in age to 40 last year, up from 32 in 2016. The doors didn't close, but the threshold rose. That same decade created power for those who already owned. The typical homeowner gained more than $214,000 in equity over the past 10 years. By comparison, the typical homeowner in 2016 had accrued less than $15,000 in the preceding decade. The financial cushion is different now. Equity builds options, renovations, moves, or the ability to wait. In a place like New York, those options change how people bid, when they list, and how long they can hold out. So, what's next for the city's for-sale market? The answer depends on where you look and what you measure. One dataset shows newly listed homes in December down 20.3% year-over-year across New York City. Another highlights the effects of new construction and fresh inventory in specific neighborhoods, enough to push overall for-sale supply higher by that 9.3% figure. Range-bound data is frustrating, but that range itself speaks to an inflection. Scarcity remains at the macro level, while select neighborhoods are suddenly flush with choices. Consider how quickly that plays out on the street. In December, a buyer in Queens might have found time on their side. 17 fewer days on the market means leverage shifts subtly toward those ready to act. In Manhattan, 6 fewer days suggests sellers with sharper pricing will move quickly. Citywide, the 90-day average keeps negotiations measured. It doesn't shut the window, but it does keep it from being left wide open. There's also a class of apartments that lives in a different reality: rent-stabilized units. Here, a specific state statute collided with rising costs. In 2019, the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act eliminated the vacancy reset, the mechanism that allowed a stabilized unit's legal rent to increase by 20% after a vacancy. Signals suggest that change has pushed roughly 50,000 units off the market in cases where operating expenses or necessary repairs exceed legal rents. Layer on higher interest rates, inflation-driven increases in operating expenses, and lower rent collections, and pressure builds. That pressure became a case study late in 2025. One large property manager with a portfolio of mostly rent-stabilized units, after growing from 267 apartments in 1,997 to 21,642 by 2006, fell into bankruptcy. As part of an agreement with its lender, Flagstar Bank, buildings containing over 5,100 units were put up for sale. A buyer, Summit Properties USA, stepped forward. City officials announced an unprecedented plan to intervene in the proceedings, arguing for immediate relief and better living conditions for tenants. A federal bankruptcy judge, David Jones, denied that request and later approved the sale. In court filings, 420 of 5,151 marketed units, about 8%, had violations, a share lower than the citywide average for serious violations, which sits around 12%. Numbers like that defy the shorthand of villains and heroes. They underscore something more brittle. When regulated revenue doesn't meet rising costs, financial structures crack. The roots travel further back. In 1993, the city set a $2,000 per month vacancy decontrol threshold. If improvements pushed a vacated unit's rent above that number, it exited stabilization. That framework encouraged capital to flow into aging buildings. It also set in motion dynamics that would later be reversed. When the 2019 law eliminated the vacancy reset and removed decontrol thresholds, the calculus changed again. Debt that once penciled out, especially debt tied to low-cost capital, stopped making sense when costs rose and rent rules tightened. This is the other half of the turning point. On one side, buyers re-entering, new construction adding relief, inventory rising in places like Brighton Beach by nearly 49%, and Flushing by 48%. On the other, a rent-stabilized sector straining under rules that cap income while expenses rise. Even city officials acknowledged, in legal filings, that rent rolls in a portion of the regulated stock don't match operational costs. That acknowledgement is a quiet truth with loud implications. Meanwhile, renters navigate cross-currents. The city's vacancy rate fell 5.8% year-over-year in December. Yet concessions hit their highest share since 2021, with nearly 1 in 4 rentals offering at least a month free. The total number of rentals on the market, 26,238 in December, declined 5.8% from the prior year. And still, median asking rent reached $3,874. These figures, taken together, point to a market where tenants are paying more for less availability, but are also being courted with incentives, especially in buildings competing for attention as would-be buyers peel off their leases. That last pivot may accelerate. Declining mortgage rates and eager sellers are expected to draw some renters into buying through 2026. December's 1,712 contracts and the month-over-month 0.7% uptick suggests this migration has already begun. The moment rates stabilize, leaseholders start running the math. If they cross the line into ownership, rental vacancy could improve at the margins even as asking rents hold firm, especially in supply-starved neighborhoods with few new rental projects. The city's for-sale inventory, while contested in the aggregate, is indisputably growing in specific neighborhoods. A buyer scanning listings in Rego Park or Long Island City today will see more options than a year ago. A seller in Crown Heights will need to price more precisely to stand out. In Bushwick and Midwood, the spike in available homes means fewer panic bids and more room to negotiate. In Sheepshead Bay and East Flatbush, longer sidelined buyers may finally sense a path to move. Even in the financial district, renewed listing momentum could compress days on market for the most realistically priced units. None of this guarantees an easy spring. For all the good news on inventory in select zip codes, other indicators keep the market taut. One measure shows New York City with 5,471 active listings in December, down 4.7% year over year, a reminder that the top line remains thin. Another shows 14,000 homes on the market last month, up 9.3% from the previous December, a reminder that new construction and seasonal behavior can tip the scales locally. This is a live market, not a solved one. Zooming out helps clarify the road ahead. Nationally, closings slipped from 5.54 million in 2016 to 4.06 million last year. The pipeline widened in one critical area, though. Single-family home starts were about 20% higher in 2025 than a decade earlier. That flow of new homes is part of why the present-day market could stabilize. It's also part of why homeowners, nationwide, gained that more than $214,000 in equity over the last decade. Equity will matter in New York's spring. Sellers with accumulated gains have room to price strategically. Buyers with cash from prior homes can move fast when they find the right fit. First-time buyers, now older on average, 40 rather than 32, may encounter more competition from equity-rich households, but they will also see something they haven't in years: time on the clock in more than a handful of neighborhoods. Still, the regulatory backdrop shapes outcomes as much as interest rates. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019 changed how rent-stabilized units move through the system by eliminating the 20% vacancy reset. Signals suggest this helped push approximately 50,000 units offline, where legal rents no longer covered climbing costs to operate or repair. In late 2025, one of the city's largest rent-stabilized landlords, after once issuing bonds abroad and expanding to tens of thousands of apartments, couldn't make the math work and entered bankruptcy. The fallout led to more than 5,100 units being set for sale, a proposed acquisition by Summit Properties USA, and a courtroom decision by Judge David Jones that kept the process moving despite the city's attempt to step in. For both tenants and owners, the numbers inside those buildings, 8% of units with violations versus a 12% citywide average for serious violations, complicate the narrative and sharpen the stakes. Out on the street, the posture of the market is already changing. In Manhattan and Queens, listings are moving faster, 6 days and 17 days shaved off, respectively. Citywide, the 90-day average market time keeps negotiators patient but not sleepy. Price reductions touched 4.2% of homes in December, a sign that sellers cannot rely on the old magic of limited supply alone. And the median listing price, at $1,500,000, being down 6.1% year over year, hints at a repositioning by sellers to meet buyers where they now stand. At the same time, renters are negotiating from a compressed angle. Vacancy down 5.8%, asking rent up to $3,874. Total rentals listed at $26,238, down 5.8%. Concessions offered on nearly 1 in 4 units, the widest reach since 2021. In Manhattan, a thin pipeline of newly constructed rentals keeps pressure on older pre-war stock. When would-be buyers paused during the rate spike, they stayed in rentals and squeezed supply even tighter. As rates ease and sellers sharpen their pencils, some of that pressure may slip back into the for-sale channel. The geography of relief matters. A nearly 49% surge in inventory in Brighton Beach changes the math for households who have watched listings for years. A 48% jump in Flushing creates a different kind of search, one with actual choices and the ability to walk away. Rego Park and Long Island City's sharp climbs invite first-time buyers to imagine landing within the city limits rather than fleeing outside of them. Bushwick, Crown Heights, Midwood, East Flatbush, Sheepshead Bay, and the Financial District each tell a common story with local accents. More listings, more leverage for buyers, higher stakes for pricing. There's also the December mirage to consider. End-of-year stats can play tricks. Yet December's 1,712 contracts and the 0.7% month-over-month rise in new deals run counter to the typical holiday lull. Combined with neighborhood-specific spikes in supply and the tightening of days on market in Manhattan and Queens, these are not mirages. They are practice shots for a busier-than-normal spring. Even with these shifts, long-term shortage hasn't vanished. Manhattan, in particular, has lagged population growth with new construction for more than a decade. That backdrop is why the range in active listings, down 4.7% by one measure, up 9.3% by another, can coexist. The city is moving through a hinge, still lean in aggregate, suddenly generous in certain corners. What does this all add up to for different players? For buyers, it signals time to prepare. In neighborhoods with surging inventory, the old pattern of sprinting and overbidding is giving way to measured tours, sharper inspections, and real negotiation. In Queens, where days on market fell by 17 days, speed still rewards readiness, but it's speed on better terms. In Manhattan, 6 fewer days means the right price clears quickly, the wrong price lingers. Citywide, the 90-day average keeps options open for buyers who need a second look or a quieter weekend to decide. For sellers, the market is asking for precision. Price reductions touched 4.2% of listings in December. The median listing price declined to $1,500,000, down 6.1% year over year. If your home is in a hot supply pocket, Brighton Beach with its nearly 49% jump, or Flushing with 48%, it must be positioned strategically or it will swim in a larger pond for longer. If you're in a tighter pocket, the 90-day average market time and the city's persistent scarcity may still favor you, but only if the list price respects the new cadence of buyers. For renters, incentives are back, but leverage is still complicated. A vacancy rate down 5.8% means the basic math of scarcity hasn't changed. A median asking rent at $3,874 affirms it. Yet nearly 1 in 4 rentals offering at least one free month, the widest reach since 2021, offers relief at the margins. That gap between scarcity and concessions is where smart tenants save money now or pivot into buying if rates tip just enough and a home in Bushwick or the Financial District suddenly fits the budget. For the regulated sector, owners and tenants of rent-stabilized housing, the stakes are systemic. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019's elimination of the 20% vacancy reset altered the revenue side of the ledger. Signals suggest roughly 50,000 units fell out of circulation where legal rents couldn't support rising expenses or essential repairs. Late 2025's bankruptcy of a major rent-stabilized portfolio, the lender's requirement to put more than 5,100 units up for sale, and the court's approval of the transfer despite a city bid to intervene point to a financial architecture under strain. Even the detail that 420 of 5,151 marketed units, 8%, had violations, lower than the 12% citywide average for serious violations, complicates the storyline further. Distress doesn't always look like decay, and rules don't automatically translate to solvency. From a macro lens, the decade-long reset frames everything. Mortgage rates at about 6.6% in 2025, up from 3.7% in 2016, changed who can enter when. National closings at 4.06 million last year, down from 5.54 million in 2016, show how many paused. Inventory, about 470,000 homes lighter than 2016's 1.65 million, kept pressure on prices. And equity, more than $214,000 accrued by the typical homeowner over 10 years, became the cushion that lets some glide while others grind. These national lines trace directly through New York's streets. Now, the outlook. The base case for 2026 is stabilization with a busier-than-usual spring on the sales side. December already moved like April, with 1,712 contracts and a 0.7% month-over-month rise in new deals. New construction added enough for sale supply to push December's inventory up 9.3% from a year before, by one measure, even as another shows a 4.7% drop when counting active listings more narrowly. Expect that split to define the next few months. Citywide scarcity alongside neighborhood spikes where buyers finally get choices. The median listing price, $1,500,000 in December, down 6.1% year over year, may find a floor in pockets of strong demand while softening further where inventory jumped. Days on market should keep compressing in Manhattan and Queens if sellers price to the current tempo. On the rental side, concessions may stay elevated as landlords compete for tenants who could be pulled toward ownership by even modest rate declines. Two watch items will shape the arc through mid-year. First, policy. The 2019 Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act's removal of the 20% vacancy reset and the signal that roughly 50,000 rent-stabilized units have been pushed off the market where costs exceed legal rents are not static facts. Any legal challenges, administrative shifts, or enforcement changes will ripple through maintenance budgets, lender confidence, and tenant stability. The late 2025 bankruptcy of a large rent-stabilized portfolio, the lender's mandate to market over 5,100 units, and a court's approval of the sale despite a city bid to intercede show how quickly the landscape can change when revenues and costs detach. Track this sector closely through the next 2 quarters. Second, rates and migration between renting and buying. With mortgage rates stabilizing late last year and sellers showing more flexibility, evidenced by that 0.7% December rise in new deals and the 4.2% share of price reductions, signals suggest some renters will cross into ownership through 2026. If that happens at scale, the rental vacancy rate, which fell 5.8% year over year in December, could tick upward, easing pressure on asking rents even as concessions remain a competitive tool. If rates stall or reverse, expect the opposite. Renters holding leases longer, concessions stretching, and the for-sale market leaning harder on neighborhood-specific inventory spikes to drive activity. In a city this complex, clarity rarely arrives all at once. But December brought a handful of sharp edges. 1,712 contracts signed, a 0.7% month-over-month rise in new deals, for-sale inventory moving anywhere from down 4.7% to up 9.3% depending on the lens. A median listing price at $1,500,000, down 6.1% year over year. Citywide time on market at 90 days, nearly flat, Manhattan and Queens speeding up by 6 and 17 days. Vacancy down 5.8%, median asking rent up nearly 8% to $3,874. 26,238 rentals listed, down 5.8%, nearly 1 in 4 units dangling a free month. Brighton Beach inventory soaring nearly 49%, flushing close behind at 48%. And more than 5,100 rent-stabilized units fed into a court-approved sale after a late-year bankruptcy. That is what a turning point looks like. It is uneven. It is local. It is numeric. Stay close to the streets with me. Subscribe to keep New York's housing story grounded in real numbers, not noise.